Greetings. Back with another one. Alright, now with this one, this video is brought to you by my boy Stray Fox. And I already reacted to one of his videos, the making of Streets of Rage 2. I highly enjoyed that video and I just had to, make a reaction to that. So if you haven't seen that, be sure you go check that one out. But I'm back again with Stray Fox, and this one he's talking about the making of Mortal Kombat. The digitized graphics in video games. Now I'm telling you, I grew up in the 90s. Like I was born in the 80s, but I grew up in the 90s. So the video game age, in terms of like I said, I was just blown away just seeing digitized, like real actors being digitized in video games. And Mortal Kombat, and I would say Pit Fighter were like the first two games I ever seen that. If you don't know what Pit Fighter is, it was actually based on I think it was based on one of the movies and stuff like that, but they used the same thing. They used like real actors and digitized them into these games and stuff like that. So the actors had to do all this type of motion capture stuff, and they used pictures to take pictures and stuff like that. And like I said, I'm sure Stray Fox would go through all that stuff, but rambling as always. So let's check this one out. The Making of Mortal Kombat by Stray Fox. And I said I'll be sure to put his channel down there so you guys can check him out. Splash Wave, the artistry of 16-bit video games.
Arcade boards were evolving rapidly during the 80s. The higher resolution and expanding color palettes quickly demanded dedicated pixel artists and tools. The Japanese companies were getting ahead of the game in producing state-of-the-art pixel graphics. Meanwhile, an important trend in computer graphics was just starting: digital imaging, editing digitized images via computer software. Jack Hager, one of the pioneers of Williams' arcade division, found himself working to launch the Amiga, hosting a live demonstration in 1985 in which Andy Warhol painted on a digitized portrait of Debbie Harry using the paint application Pro Paint. Hager left a year later to rejoin Williams, along with the two other arcade pioneers Eugene Jarvis, Fender and Robotron fame,
the old arcade
and Qbert
games,
co-creator Warren Davis. The three men were tasked to revitalize the once successful Williams video game branch. They embraced the concept of using digitized graphics to rival the pixel art of Japanese developers. By 1986, it was a bold concept, as digital imaging was still in its infancy. They had to set up a workflow from scratch using...
Now, I remember when I was a kid, I had, what was it? Yeah, like this, like the old, like the old computers and stuff like that. When I came up in school, I mean, we were still using we were using like the Apple II, which came out in the 80s and stuff like that. When I was in elementary school, we had the old Apple, computers and stuff like that. If you're as old as I am, my generation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We had the old Apple computers, man, the big giant, cream color looking, Mac computers and stuff like that. That took the floppy disk and all that stuff. And this was around this time and stuff like that. So they had like the, the paint tool, I don't even know what you call it, application back then that we would use and stuff like that. And I used to use that application all the time to like make pictures and stuff like that. But that's seems like they were doing pretty much the same thing to digitize these video games, which is pretty cool.
Concept, as digital imaging was still...
I remember using all this stuff.
They had to set up a workflow from scratch using what limited hardware and tools were available, in addition to creating their own. By the mid-80s, simple paint applications for desktop systems were plentiful. But when it came to digital imaging, the gap between high-end systems and the desktop market was still huge. The high-end Quantal Paintbox systems gave the artist in the broadcast and advertising industry the power to manipulate full-color digitized image from live feeds. Not having $1 million budget to afford these, the Williams crew experimented with early photo digitizers like the NewTek DigiView for the Amiga. But being developed for consumers to digitize still images, it was too slow and cumbersome for a bigger production. Luckily, a more robust solution came around in 1987. AT&T Epic Center launched their TrueVision Advanced Raster Graphics Adapter, better known as Targa. These high-color graphic boards for the PC market could directly digitize images from analog feeds, coming from a video camera or tape deck, for instance.
It's the old Targa graphics card.
The versatile TrueVision image processing package, TIPS. On top of that, they also came with an SDK which allowed Warren Davis to write his own image capture software catered toward their needs called WTARG. The game Narc, by programmers Eugene
old school
Jarvis
processing
and George
systems,
Petro,
man.
would be Williams' first release to make use of their new workflow, featuring the two vigilantes
Narc, I
Max
remember
Force
that
and
game.
Hitman, with their iconic red Porsche shooting their way through thugs and crime lords. Team members dressed up and were filmed on tape and digitized. Narc featured over-the-top action and became the origin of their company motto.
Like I just miss this
reality
era,
is
man. Just
boring.
using the real
Williams
actors
managed
to make
ship
these games. I just miss
3,000
that era.
arcade units. Combined with their growing success in their pinball division, this ignited a recruitment drive. After the acquisition of the pinball and arcade division of their longtime competitor, Williams Electronics was officially
Valley
rebranded
Midway.
to Midway. The 90s would kick off with an
lot of
important
memories
meeting for
playing
the
Midway
acquisition
games.
of the license for Terminator 2. Midway and their publishing partner Acclaim had teamed up on a deal that would involve the rights to a
Acclaim.
pinball table, an arcade game, and a video game adaptation of this highly anticipated movie.
Yep, I remember
During
playing
the
this
meeting
too.
in LA, they pitched their ideas and showed the digitization process behind Narc. Director James Cameron, who happened to join the meeting, was intrigued by the similarities with film production. His enthusiasm helped to ease the deal, and within a few hours they had already started brainstorming ideas for their games. Before flying back to Chicago, the Midway crew paid a visit to Stan Winston's effects studio to study the various T-800 endoskeleton stop-motion.
Like I said, man, using like the real actors and digitizing and stuff. Like I said, look. I mean, in retrospect, it probably look. I mean, it probably looks cheesy now, but if you're, a part of my generation, this stuff it blew us away when we first saw this stuff. I mean, I still go back and play the old Mortal Kombat games. 2 is still my favorite one of all time. It just, like I said, it's just obviously it's nostalgia purpose and stuff like that. It's just when you play games as a little kid, that never goes away. It's just something about that era that I grew up in playing video games in the early years. The Genesis and the original NES, Super NES and stuff like that, and then the Neo Geo and all this stuff. It's just that era of gaming really, really I hold dear. And it doesn't mean that I don't love video games. And I'm always gonna be a gamer no matter what. But it's just something about that era that it just never leaves you.
Puppets. Back at Midway, the T-800 model was filmed from numerous poses, frame by frame, in a simple tabletop photo studio and run through the digitization process.
Judgment Day.
When principal photography of the feature film started later that year, the developers were granted access to the set to shoot their own material, which was an industry first. Between scenes, they shot their own footage with Arnold Schwarzenegger's stunt double, Linda Hamilton's twin sister, and two of the main
I
cast
like how
members,
they
Robert
work with
Patrick
Arnold and
Edward
Linda and all
Furlong.
them and
Warren
Patrick
Davis
and all
joined
them.
the
It's pretty
Terminator
cool how
2
they
team
used them for
halfway
that.
as
I remember
senior
playing this game
programmer,
too.
and created a sophisticated image compression algorithm that allowed them to incorporate short clips from the film. In the summer of 1991, when movie-going audiences were dazzled by
I'll be
Terminator
back.
2, they could relive their experiences with the themed pinball and arcade game. Acquiring the license proved to be very lucrative.
There's
for
so many
Midway.
memories, man.
While arcade goers relentlessly spent their coins in the light gun game, a completely new arcade hit was already in the making. When T2 was still in production, artist John Tobias and programmer Ed Boon had discussed their ideas for a versus fighting game, making full use of the digitizing tech inside the company. Tobias and Boon were part of a new generation of game developers that
Karate
grew up
Champ,
playing
yeah,
arcade
that was
games
a good
themselves
one.
and formed by the entertainment of the 70s and 80s.
Bruce.
With video games still being a new industry, it was quite common for these young game designers to end up directing their own game projects early on in their careers, molding all their childhood favorites together into unique productions of their own. The initial pitch for their project was made to management with the promise of tying in an action star to the project. While licensing was trying to secure a deal, Tobias and Boon
Master Daniel Pacina, who was the original Johnny Cage in the first two Mortal Kombat games, he was a big part of the making process as well. If you don't know who Daniel Pacina is, I highly recommend you look him up, especially if you're a Mortal Kombat fan. He really, goes down to the backstory because, like, Daniel Pacina, Master Pacina, he actually knew John Tobias, and I think they all grew up in or lived in in the Chicago area or stuff like that. But Master Pacina and his brother and John, I think they all kind of knew each other, and I think Ed Boon was working with I think he was like working with Midway or something like that as a correspondent. I can't remember, but Ed Boon was kind of like around. But like Master Basenta was talking about like how, for example, like I'll get into it later. I'll get into it a little later, once he starts going. But like I said, they would when they like I said, Master Basenta was talking about this. They were trying to get like these big guys in the movies and stuff. They like Johnny Cage was really, like I said. I'm telling you, the movie Bloodsport. I'm telling you, it's two films in particular that I think that John Tobias and Master Basenta, all of them got like once they saw like John Tobias in particularly, and I think once he saw Enter the Dragon and Bloodsport, like he like those two like say obviously the Liu Kang character is based on Bruce Lee, and the Johnny Cage character was actually based on Jean-Claude Van Damme, and they tried to get Van Damme for the game, but he refused to do it and stuff like that, and then I think they kind of made Cage into like more of a comic, type character. I guess I wouldn't say to get back at Jean-Claude, but it's stuff like that. They kind of made him more of like a humorous, goofy type character, stuff like that. But obviously Johnny Cage, he's a fan favorite. He's been around for a long time, still around.
And finished their work on their assigned projects in the coming months. Although their fighting game had not been officially greenlit, it evolved in Tobias's mind as he continued to think of the potential characters. He researched books on Asian mythology and martial arts history. He came across a book
Yeah, and all this stuff. This is stuff that he, worked with Master Basenta. I'm saying Daniel Basenta. He is a big part of the making of the original game. He really is, because, like I said, he studied all this stuff. He studied like the the Chinese ninjas and stuff like that. Like Scorpion and Sub-Zero, stuff like that. The Chinese, Scorpion, Hanzo Hasashi, he's Japanese, stuff like that. But he studied. But he was like the Lin Kuei and stuff like that. All of that stuff was kind of like Master Basenta's idea, and he had a background, and he studied. And like I said, look him up. He studies this stuff till this day and stuff like that. So, for example, the idea of Scorpion Spear, Master Basenta, he actually brought that to, like, I guess you could say, the set or whatever. He brought like this because they were trying to come up with with these moves sets for these characters. So he was talking about like this weapon that the Chinese assassins would use. The spear, the Scorpion Spear, it would be attached to like a rope, and it would have like a little spearhead at the end, and they would use it to like snatch people off their horses and stuff like that. It was stuff like that. But Master Basenta, he was talking about all that stuff, the history of it, but they were going through all of this stuff, and the Lin Kuei and all that stuff. So yeah, like I highly recommend you look up Daniel Basenta, man, because his backstory and how all this came to be, it's so fascinating. It's very fascinating, and I don't think that Master Basenta really gets enough credit for it. I mean, obviously, John Tobias and Master Basenta, then are a part of it today. Ed Boon is really the guy now who's keeping it together. But highly recommend you look up Daniel Basenta, Master Daniel Basenta, and he really, really goes into the backstory about
describing a cult of assassins from northern China, the Lin Kuei. Although there's doubt as to whether they ever existed, the concept appealed to the designer and was the birth of Sub-Zero and his Japanese ninja counterpart and arch nemesis, Scorpion.
Iconic spear.
Tobias chose to stick to clear archetypes, easily identifiable in the player's mind without the need for elaborate backstories. They would be a mixture of characters with supernatural powers and more grounded martial artists. Several months passed before an opportunity arose for the young game designer duo. Midway's manufacturing department foresaw a gap in their production schedule in the near future. To keep the factory running, Midway quickly needed a new arcade game. Combined with the massive success of the fighting genre thanks to Street Fighter II, this had management greenlighting Mortal Kombat with the premise that it had to be done in 6 months.
One day I will have that cabinet.
To portray the stars of the game, Tobias would...
And then you got Master Basenta is on the right. And then you got Ho-Sung Pak, who played Liu Kang in the middle. And I can never remember the guy who played Kano. But that's the Kano actor, the guy on the left. I can never remember his name. But yeah, man, but Master Basenta, the guy on the right, man, he was a big part of, coming up with these ideas and stuff like that. And I think like I said, he portrayed, he was the Johnny Cage model, but he was also the Scorpion and Sub-Zero model as well. And his brother, or Carlos Basenta, his brother Carlos, I think he was Raiden. And like I said, Master Basenta, his brother Carlos, and John Tobias, they all knew each other, and they were just coming up with these ideas, man. And just like I said, I can't stress it enough, man. Look him up if, like I said, if you're a Mortal Kombat fan like me, look him up and just hear from the master himself.
would call upon the talents of local martial artists.
Yeah,
whom he
Ho-Sung
wanted to
Pak was
shoot
one
an
of the
indie
turtles,
movie
I
with
remember
years
that.
prior.
Just
Licensing
so
had
cool,
been
man.
unsuccessful in warming celebrity stars to the project, but it actually gave the production a great deal of freedom. These young martial artists and actors participated in the project with a great deal of enthusiasm and time to dedicate.
And recently, you know, I did some AI work for a company and stuff like that. It's when it's kind of like this, you know, you stand into like the box and stuff like that, and they capture all your moves. This is how they used to do it. You know, the characters, you know, they would throw a punch or throw a kick, and they will fall down and they'll react to like taking damage, stuff like that. And they had to, and like I said, Master Basena, he said that John Tobias actually used like his dad's camera, something like that. And it was just the regular, it was just like one of those camcorders that they would use back in the day to capture all of this stuff. And I can't remember how long the sessions were, but yeah, man, and just the thing, man, like something like this became what it is today. It's crazy to think about it.
Tobias was mindful to keep their costumes composed
cool,
of a
man.
single primary color to make them work in the low resolution with restricted color palette. Bits and pieces for their outfits came from their collection or were brought in from places like sporting goods stores and costume shops. A shared storage space in the back of the pinball manufacturing plant was converted to a simple studio.
Pinball manufacturing, so that's what
Footage was shot with a Hi8 camcorder, a
Yeah.
consumer analog 8mm tape format that had just been brought onto the market by Sony and Canon in 1989. In comparison to its predecessor Video 8 and VHS, Hi8 had a much higher luminance resolution. This made it a suitable format to capture images for the big sprites they envisioned for their project within a modest budget. Before putting all characters through the workflow, an initial test was done with martial artist Daniel
and like he's
Pensina.
using the treadmill
The
to
shot
capture the
material was
walking
loaded
movements.
in the Hi8 deck and connected to the Targa board inside the workstation. By using the WTarg software, Tobias could capture paused frames to digital files. The software reduced the colors using the latest color reduction algorithms. Images were boosted in contrast and saturation for a more vibrant look, and the backgrounds were painstakingly removed frame by frame. The edges in particular required a lot of care. Arcade hardware at the time didn't fully support transparency values per pixel, meaning pixels were either fully opaque or transparent. Tobias had to make the edges of characters work against both bright and dark backgrounds. The test shoot greatly helped to figure out what kind of moves would translate best to low-resolution sprite.
Like I said, they had to capture all those movements, and then they had to program it to like separate files and stuff like that. And then all that pixel work, man, I can't imagine how long that must have took doing all that pixel work and trying to like edge them out so it can, you know, show up, so it can really look good on the final layout and stuff like that. I can't imagine how long that took. I mean, it looked like they were doing that stuff, you know, by hand and stuff like that. It's crazy.
Tobias and Boone made a list of moves for each character. The actors helped interpret these in a way that fit their characters, as well as sharing their own ideas. Daniel Pensina would then help out on set to further instruct the other actors. Air attacks
Like I
were
said,
done with the help
exactly.
of a small
Master
wooden
Basena,
staircase, which gave
he
them
like I
the
said,
freedom to take the pose
he was
they
a big
wanted,
part of it.
and would also eliminate any motion blur that would otherwise be introduced. Artist John Vogel joined the team and would work on the game's backgrounds, using Tobias's sketches as a starting point. He filmed various model kits and statues, taking into account the direction that
Like I said, it shows you how far we've gotten in gaming, man, because today's games, you probably have like several hundred people working on one game. This time, I remember Mr. Boone saying like, it was probably like, you could probably count on one hand the entire team to make the first Mortal Kombat game. So it just shows you how far the technology has gone, man. Oh, come on.
that light would hit the objects at in particular stages.
Now they're doing
The
this.
separate digitized
Hold on, you guys. It always wants to do this when I'm recording.
objects were composited in the software
Always
package
wanna do this
TIPS
when I'm
to
recording.
form a single consistent background. Most of the game's graphical elements were all digitized to fit in with the real-world look.
Toasty.
Programmer Ed Boone took the digitized assets and started to implement them into the game. He had a great grasp on gameplay and envisioned a fast-paced fighter. The number of animation frames for attacks were kept to a minimum to make gameplay responsive and reduce the overall memory footprint. The feel of the impact is crucial for a fighting game. Boon made sure the strong blows were communicated to the player through sound and visual cues like screen shake and timing.
Like I said, you got to do
Memory
it.
chips
As
were
I said,
still
you had to
among the
do
most expensive
everything
components of the arcade cabinet, and thus the team had to
that was
find
within
clever
memory
workarounds
storage
to make the most out of the limited ROM space. For example, Boon used the compression algorithm written by Warren Davis on a large, imposing image of Goro.
And it's funny that the Goro was like actually a toy, from what I was told. I don't know if I don't know if it was an actual actor in the suit, but I think Goro was like a toy.
Featured in the Attract mode. This Ray Harryhausen-inspired boss character had been in Tobias's mind from the start.
Ray Harryhausen,
He contacted his friend Kurt Chiarelli to sculpt the four-armed brute and handcraft a professional stop-motion puppet.
Yeah, so they made like a armature, not an armature, but a maquette pretty much, and same thing that they did in films back in the day. Like you mentioned, Ray Harryhausen. Ray Harryhausen was the guy who did all those famous, monster films back in the day, like in the old days where they would use, stop motion animation and stuff like that. And basically, you will make a maquette, which is what that Goro is. A maquette is basically just a small figure of the model, and they will put it on these things called an armature, which is kind of like a little, I can't describe it, but it's basically something that they would use so it can hold on to the maquette, and you would just use the maquette, and move it a millimeter at a time so you can capture all of the movements. That's how they used to do stop motion back in the day. I don't know if they did that with Mortal Kombat Legacy. I'm sure he'll talk about it.
Tobias did the stop motion work himself and filmed the puppet in a
there you go. See that
setup.
little thing right there? That's an armature that Goro is
Due
attached
to the very tight schedule of Mortal Kombat, decisions were often made in production on the spot, leading to some unexpected but defining elements. Ed Boon took the image frames meant for final boss Shang Tsung's beheading sequence and tied them to Johnny Cage's uppercut at the end of the fight. The result was shocking and exciting at the same time, and was the birth of the fatality. Midway had a
That's still my
atmosphere.
like, it's between Sub-Zero and Johnny Cage. My two favorite ones. Like Kano. Yeah, Kano was my original favorite. So I used to play with him the
Composer
most.
Dan Forden enhanced the game's atmosphere with his dark, aggressive
the heart
soundtrack
out.
with hints of Asian inspiration. Ed Boon had already showcased his
Like I
voice
said,
acting
that's
skills on
this stage right
numerous
here is
pinball
Into the
machines
Dragon
and
all the way.
arcade
It
games,
is.
and would also do so for Mortal Kombat.
Finish him. Excellent.
The raw, bloody, over-the-top action quickly caught traction inside the company, but Mortal Kombat was about to endure its first big test. It is tradition for arcade games to test early prototypes during production in a selected arcade to estimate how well the game will perform, typically a stressful moment as a poor result.
And this is crazy, like back in the day, like Mortal Kombat, out of all of the arcade fighters that I played, Mortal Kombat I think is probably, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but out of all the arcade games that I played, the fighters, Mortal Kombat had like a block button. And a lot of fighters you just hold back, the block and stuff like that, Street Fighter stuff like that. But like it said, it had as you see the the arcade panel right there, it had the low punch, the low kick, and then you had the high punch, the high kick, and stuff like that. It was pretty basic and stuff like that. Like I said, like a lot of the arcade fighters and stuff like that. And yeah, it's just craziest thing where it actually had a block button. So that was very unique. And so it actually had a block button.
Could mean the end of the project. With some nerves, Tobias rolled in their pre-production arcade cabinet. Crowds were packed around Street Fighter II. Slowly and steadily, they would move over to Mortal Kombat to witness for themselves the raw, over-the-top action by the lifelike fighters.
Like I said, it was such a departure from the fighters at that time because it was the only one that had blood and gore.
Production. The character of Sonya was added late in the process to round up the roster of playable characters. She was given the backstory for an already conceptualized secret agent character. Because filming of actors and pickup shots took place over the course of production, consistency in filming and post-production
Liz Malecki, I believe her name was Elizabeth Malecki, I think her name.
While personnel at Midway were playtesting the prototypes, the Mortal Kombat crew brought the whole cast back for the character profile scenes. The actors were shot against a piece of black cloth to quickly provide some texture without the need for laborious post-production.
So cool.
Once the final touches were made and ROMs were burned, the manufacturing department constructed the cabinets to be distributed among arcades around the world. The game's raw, lifelike look, combined with the over-the-top, gory action, attracted audiences, but the fun and fast gameplay made them come back again and again, making it a big hit in the arcades. The publishing company, Acclaim, had already signed a deal with Williams years prior to have the first refusal for any of their console adaptations. Porting the games was outsourced to development companies who they deemed fitting for the project. Acclaim bet heavily on the success of Mortal Kombat, dedicating a marketing budget past the $10 million
Game
mark.
Boy. I had the
Numbers
second
unheard of for a
Mortal Kombat
third-party
Game Boy.
game. Within a couple of weeks, Acclaim would fully recoup their investment. The home conversions catapulted the popularity of Mortal Kombat, bringing it to the masses. Sega especially
Remember this
greatly
commercial
benefited
too.
from its success, as their version still included all the fatalities via a secret code, leading it to outsell the Super Nintendo version by 3-1.
Yeah, because like I said, in the Nintendo version, it was, you know, you always had to put the blood code in there just so. But like I said, I've always liked the Sega version better. I mean, yeah, the Super NES version was strong and stuff like that, but I don't know, it just, I've always played the Sega one. That was just the one that I, always played. I had it, my cousin had it. We were Genesis guys, and I had the Super Nintendo, when it came out, but it was just something about the Genesis I've always, just taken to it. I don't know, like I said, it's just nostalgia for me, and I've always liked the Sega sounds and stuff like that, especially for the second game.
In the early 90s, digital imaging was maturing at a rapid pace. In the visual effects industry, the transition to digital compositing software took the market by storm. Renowned high-end packages like Flame and Nuke were introduced to assist the artists with the ever-growing challenges. In the desktop market, Video Toaster for the Amiga and the first releases of Premiere and After Effects hit the market. On the still image front, Photoshop was quickly making its mark as an affordable alternative to costly high-end image editing systems, as were its competing packages PaintShop Pro and PhotoPaint. Inside Williams, there was a growing reliance on digitized graphics. Jack Hager and Warren Davis made it a priority to update their studio and equipment. Davis upgraded the capture PCs with a new Targa Plus board that had a built-in chroma keyer. Chroma keyers are software functions that enable artists to create an alpha matte by selecting a specific color range, and so separate actors from their backgrounds. Davis improved his capture software to make full use of this feature. Midway also invested in a broadcast quality Betacam camera, which was a big step up from the prosumer Hi8 format, eliminating the overexposed highlights that plagued the crew before. The new studio setup was done right in time for the sequel to their successful fighter, Mortal Kombat 2.
The second Sub-Zero that stands, man. There you go, MK2, man. Like, they kicked it up a notch with this one, man. More
One
characters.
dilemma the Mortal Kombat team still
more
faced
moves,
was whether
more
or
blood.
not to shoot the actors against a blue screen. Compared to the consumer tape formats, the chrominance, or color resolution of Betacam was higher, and thus more suitable for keying. But it was still an analog tape format that would mean some blue would bleed over into the actors. The tools available at Midway for dealing with these issues were not adequate, and would mean extra touch-up work by hand for the artist. For the time being, they found that shooting against a grey background was still the more economical option in their situation. When going around the arcades, the Mortal Kombat crew would always check from the operator menu which characters were the most popular. These statistics greatly influenced who to include in the sequel. By taking advantage of palette swaps and the increased ROM capacity, the roster was boosted to 12 playable characters. It would mark the introduction of Jax and Kitana, who had been considered for the first game. The original Mortal Kombat had a raw, digitized look, partly because of its compressed schedule. For the sequel, the art team digitally touched up all character frames during post-production to accentuate facial features, muscles, and other details, leading to a much cleaner look. To aid in this laborious process, Tony Goski joined the art team. Like Vogel and Tobias, he was a graduate of the American Academy of Art. Tobias remained in charge of character design, along with his role as co-director, shared with Ed Boon. The tournament in Mortal Kombat 2 was set in the fictional location Outworld, which allowed for more fantastical new characters and environments. a perfect fit for Tony's talent in surrealism.
Dead
The
Pit.
backgrounds were created using a mixture of traditional
math.
pixel art and digitized images and textures.
Living
For example,
Force.
Midway artist Steve Baran dressed up as a floating monk for the occasion.
I'm telling you, man, like when Mortal Kombat 1 came out in the arcades, it was 1991. I was about like 4 or 5 years old. And I remember playing it that young. I was probably like 5 going on 6 when I was playing them. But in the first game in the arcades was kind of reasonable. The second game in the arcade, it was so cheap. Oh my gosh, man! You probably can get through a couple of characters, but at a point, man, you just like I said in a previous video, man. Arcades are just designed to take your money. Like I've always said, man. So they will, some of these games they will make them just cheap, damn near impossible to beat. I think I probably beat Mortal Kombat 2 in the arcades maybe once, maybe, but it was, oh my gosh. And you know, I was dying to play with Shang Tsung. Shang Tsung, he's my favorite character, you know, from Mortal Kombat 2 onward. But I wanted to try him because, of course, he was the boss in the first game. But they had limited memory storage and stuff like that. So that was the reason why they came up with the idea for Shang Tsung to like morph into all different characters, because they had no more storage left. So they just gave him the ability to turn into everybody else, to morph into everybody else and do their moves. So that was the reason why, and that was the reason why when you see like the way he stands, his stance is kind of like he's just standing still. It looked like he's kind of floating in the first game. So just because of the lack of memory, they just kind of like just do all that at the last minute for like Shang Tsung. So that's why he had that concept. But I thought that was fascinating when I first saw it as a kid. You know, a character who could just morph into everybody else and stuff like that. So you know, when he became a playable character in the second game, and Kano wasn't in the second game as a playable character, he and Sonya got taken out, you know, for the story and stuff like that. But when Shang Tsung was a playable character, I played with him like crazy. And of course, I've always liked, you know, like Melina too. She was a new character in the second game. I loved playing with her, and Scorpion and stuff like that. I mean, I love playing with everybody. Everybody was great in their own ways. So I mean, I really wanted to get good with everybody, and you know how to do the fatalities and stuff like that. But yeah, man, just so many memories, many memories.
Ed Boon would further improve the gameplay, making it feel tighter. The fatalities
It
were
was
a key
such an
attraction of
improvement,
Mortal
too.
Kombat. In the
Wow.
sequel, they were even more outrageous, and for the more compassionate players, friendship and babalities were added to the mix. For the safety
Babalities,
of the actors,
friendships.
most of these effects were created digitally. The dragon transformation was realized using the latest morphing software to smoothly morph frames of the actor into the pixel art dragon. To Dan Forden's delight, the new arcade board used a sample-based ADSP audio board. Instead of relying on FM instrumentation, he could now incorporate real guitar and flute recordings into the score. Pinball legend Steve Ritchie would lend his
Like I
deep
said, that's
voice
the
to
arcade
project as the announcer
theme,
and Shao
like the
Kahn.
music. I still prefer the old Genesis themes, the old Genesis music and the sounds.
As the
I still prefer
production advanced with
the
Mortal
Genesis
Kombat
ones.
2,
I
Warren
just do.
Davis solved a big bottleneck in the production process. Taking advantage of higher buses and bigger hard drives, he upgraded his capture software to take direct feeds from the camera sensor, thereby bypassing the tape compression. This greatly improved the clarity of the final image and made shooting against blue screen a much more economical solution for the crew. All footage for the final boss Shao Kahn was
We don't
filmed
even use
using
blue
this
screens
enhanced
really anymore.
setup. Isolating the actor
Now we use
frames
green
from the
screens now.
background was now less labor-intensive. All the
That
improvements
was
made to the
pathetic.
workflow, in combination with the larger development window, would take the sequel above and beyond. The massive success of Mortal Kombat 2 established that the series was there to stay.
Toro, man, cheap bastard.
Atari Games was another
There you go,
company
Pit
that
Fighter, see,
embraced
there you go.
digitized graphics in their arcade games early on. Arcade pioneer Dave Teurer,
Is it Pit Fighter? It was such a
responsible
fun
for Tempest,
game, man.
concentrated
I
on
really love
developing
playing
his
it,
own
man.
graphics tool
For the
in the late
Genesis.
80s
It was such a
called
fun game.
Debabilizer. Atari made great use of it during the development of their games at that time, one of them being Pit Fighter.
Pit Fighter, man.
This
I had
game was
so
first
much fun
pitched in
playing
late
this game.
1988
I actually played it for
Bloodsport.
the Genesis first, and then I
According
played
to
it in
their
the arcade.
market research, some of the strongest earnings were made by games in this genre. The development team
Kato,
made
that's
sure
why I used to
their
play with
product
Kato.
would differ from the competition, introducing the
Like I said,
gritty
it's
lifelike
pretty
look
much
to
the
the
Def
genre.
Jam Fight for New York before that.
Debabilizer
It was the
an
original
important
Def Jam
package
Fight
that
for
could
New York, if
process
you really
all
think about it.
digitized frames and create palleted files. The artist could use its color reduction algorithm or define their own palette. They chose to dedicate a large
Max.
portion of the palette to the flesh tones to
Or
realize the
Buzz,
smooth
Buzz?
gradients.
Yeah, I think it was Buzz.
For
Buzz,
animation
yeah.
purposes, the artists relied on Atari's own package called RAD. Pit Fighter was a great success for Atari and would get its spiritual sequel in Guardians of the Hood. Toiro left Atari and made Debabilizer
I
commercially
never played Guardians of
available.
the Hood.
It quickly
Never did.
became the package to edit large numbers of images through automated batch processes.
Debabilizer, yeah.
Primal Rage would prove to be Atari Games' most ambitious
Rage!
project, pitting fierce, prehistoric monsters against each other in a violent battle. The work of the artists was becoming more diverse than ever before as the industry was moving in new directions. They had to quickly master complex techniques used for feature film
Primal
production,
Rage.
as the bar for video game graphics kept
Because I
being
played it for a
raised.
little bit.
One of the
Wasn't-
leads
wasn't-
on
wasn't
Primal Rage got in
too
contact
into
with
it.
a local stop-motion company that introduced him to Pete Cloneau, a stop-motion veteran with credits ranging from Gremlins to The
You got
Empire
the
Strikes
maquette,
Back.
Put it
To
onto
turn
the
the concept
armature. and
into
just-
stop-motion puppets, Atari contracted a renowned LA-based model shop. The company sculpted and detailed clay models and made the final foam casts through a series of time-consuming processes, costing Atari $50,000 per beast.
Per beast. I wonder how much that estimates to today.
The puppets were shot frame by frame in a small studio setup. Art director Jason Leong sketched out the various poses as reference for the stop-motion animator. They adapted a key method used in the visual effects
Like I said-
industry to shoot
like I
each
said,
frame
all
in
of this was
multiple
stop motion
passes.
to
A beauty
make
pass
these,
that lights the characters in the best
animals.
possible way.
All of it.
A matte pass in which only the background was lit and so could be used as an alpha channel. And lastly, a shadow pass that had strong.
Let me get to Mortal Kombat.
Over at Midway,
Back
the
to
Mortal
that.
Kombat crew was wrapping their heads around the third installment. They knew they had to
Now, as far as Mortal Kombat 3, the third installment, it just... I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it. It was still Mortal Kombat, but I don't know. It was just... Out of the first three, for some reason, it's just the third one, it didn't take to me as much as the second one did, or the first one. I don't know why. It was just... I can't really place my finger on it. I don't know. It's kind of like how Streets of Rage is. It's the third game really didn't hold on. It really didn't take to me like the second one did. I don't know. It's just the third installments of these games. I don't know. It was just something about it that just didn't grasp me. I'm like, I still played it, but not as much. I kind of like went away from Mortal Kombat when the third game came out and stuff like that, and then I just went back to like playing 2, and I kind of like stayed there for a while until like the fourth game came out.
switch some things up to keep it fresh for arcade audiences.
And that's when they put the combos and the running
Part
in there
2
and stuff
had
like
such a
that. It was
big
kind of
focus on
crazy.
the ninja-style characters that their number was drastically toned down for the third entry, and an array of new characters were added to the mix,
Shiva.
ranging from stop-motion puppet Shiva to the cyber assassins played by NBA Jam pixel artist. His costume was a mixture of BMX motocross and hockey gear, rubber tubing, and the necessary duct
Like I said, the costumes look amazing. They do.
Production could
They
now
really
make
look cool.
full use of the digital shooting stage from the get-go, capturing and even selecting the frames live on set. Extracting the actors from the backgrounds was now a largely automated process. Only their boots were still masked manually because a blue floor would cause too much blue spill. Learning from past experience, they mainly chose tight-fit clothes as they translated best to the low-resolution graphics. The majority of the actors were dressed in red. Costumes that were meant to include blues were shifted to the correct color in post-production.
Yeah, that was something that was strange. They all wore red
originally.
originally. Not all of us,
ultimately
most of
clearer
them did.
sprites, although the final touch-up work remained laborious. On the software front, Photoshop was on its way to become an industry standard. Before the Mortal Kombat crew started working on the third game, Photoshop 2.5 hit the market, featuring an extensive toolset to paint and isolate areas and manipulate them. Photoshop was a valuable addition for the art team and would be used in conjunction with the other packages. Another undeniable trend in gaming graphics was the use of 3D packages. Midway attracted David Mikicic, a teacher in computer graphics
David-
at Columbia College. He would bring them up to speed and, together with the new recruit Steve Buran, further strengthen the art team. They brought Earthrealm to life using one of the
concept
leading
art and all
3D
that stuff,
packages,
it just-
running on a Silicon Graphics Indigo workstation. Ed Boon sped up the action for this installment with a new run ability, direct
It was
combos,
crazy,
and more
man. Knocking
assertive
people
AI.
up on ceilings
The
and stuff.
programmer had always been a fan of hiding secrets in the games,
Yeah, the third game
some
was
even
just so
unknown to his
crazy.
fellow workers. For Mortal Kombat 3, he actually implemented some fan theories, like
Feel your
animalities.
animality. Animalities were ridiculous, man.
A unique
then they had
feature
the
Ed Boon
brutalities
come
and all
up
that
with
stuff,
during
it was
production
crazy.
was a code system whereby players could unlock a variety of play features with specific symbol combinations. Marketing ran with the idea and planned out the leaking
Yeah,
of
Midway
codes
was very
and
big on that stuff,
publications
the
throughout
code
the
entry
year,
and stuff like
adding
that.
to the longevity of the arcade game. Furthermore, arcade owners were guaranteed a free upgrade of the game, featuring new backgrounds and characters that were held back for the original release. The upgrade would coincide with home ports for the regular Mortal Kombat 3, and thus guaranteed arcade owners to have the latest exclusive edition available to keep players interested.
Jade, she was so... I could not stand
Mortal
fighting her,
Kombat
man.
3 marked the end of an era. The usage of 3D packages to help create the backgrounds had been a foreshadowing of the direction of the series. The shooting
Yeah.
stage was replaced by a motion capture studio.
Yeah, of course, it was the end of an era. You know, Mortal Kombat 4 was the first 3D, fighter for the series and stuff like that. And I would say I probably played 4. I probably had a funner time playing 4 more than 3, mainly because it was just a different change of pace. It was, the first 3D and stuff like that. It looked very different. It looked kind of cool when I first played in arcades. Yeah, I took to 4. It was basically was just like 3, but in 3. It was pretty much like MK3, but in 3D, graphics and stuff like that. It just because it just looked different. It was different change of pace, and then they added like the weapons and stuff like that. It was just I don't know. It was just something about 4 that was fun. But like I said, I still just love 2. 2 was just still my favorite one out of all of them. I can't explain it, but
As the characters were now created in the digital realm. Within the industry, the trend to digitize actors and set
Street
pieces
Fighter the
would
movie.
last for a couple more years, but would quickly make way for CGI.
yeah, the
The
Aerosmith
digitization
game. Yeah.
trend brought us many different aesthetics, blending all kinds of crafts with the video game world. Filming,
Kaboom.
compositing to stop-motion animation, and even claymation. During its rise, the advancements in desktop systems and imaging software had been tremendous. But nevertheless, the tool development of Davis and Toira proved to be pivotal to the workflow. Although the workflows would drastically change in the Polygon era, some of the principles would still remain useful for the artists during their careers.
Oh yeah, bam! I always thought the fatality was hilarious. Yeah, man. What can I say, man? MK, man. 1991 all the way to present time, man. I mean, look how far they come now. And, this was a franchise that had to reinvent itself. I mean, like a lot of gaming franchises, you move with the technology. So, but it's just something about the old school digitized characters using like real actors to make the game. It was just such a revolutionary way to make games, and it wasn't a lot of companies doing it. And like I said, I think I speak for a lot of people of my era who saw that it was just something different. It was just something different. It wasn't like Street Fighter. It wasn't like King of Fighters, anything like that, or Virtual Fighter, stuff like that. It was just, and because the game was so violent and gory, that was already a departure. So Mortal Kombat always was kind of in a class by itself for those reasons. And whenever the next game came out, we always I can remember just chatting to everybody, in school, like what the fatalities are gonna look like and stuff like. What characters they gonna add, just all of the conversations that you had with your buddies, in school and stuff about the latest games and stuff that was coming out. But yeah, man, as always, Stray Foxy does a good job, editing these videos and really diving into the history and stuff, the making of it. But yeah, Mortal Kombat is is still my favorite fighter of all time. It just, like I said, it's such a departure. It's in a class by itself. and it seems that MK1. I don't know how well the reception for MK1 is. I still don't have it. I don't know. It's just I can't get past the cameo system. I just didn't think that Mortal Kombat needed. I mean, it was a novelty for a while in the past couple of games, but the cameo system has just become instrumental to the gameplay, and it's just something I struggle to get behind. But yeah, a buddy of mine, he plays MK1. He's getting really better at it and stuff like that. A couple buddies of mine, they play it, so I kind of like keep in touch with them about what's the latest meta and stuff like that. With these for these fighters, particularly MK. But yeah, man, I just salute to Straight Fox for this one, man. The making of Mortal Kombat, man. All the way back to when I was playing as a kid and at my present age, and just cherishing this franchise, and just seeing what Ed Boon and the company, the team at NetherRealms, seeing where they take this. And obviously Ghostface just dropped, so I know everybody's playing with Ghostface. And like I said, I'll get into it one of these days, man. I mean, they do have Shang Tsung still on there, Melina still on there, some of my top three. So yeah, man, another one for the archives. 31 cents at it. It's your brother Bleak signing out. Until next time, you guys. Us.